Today's guest is a 25-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps, where he held multiple command roles, including Commanding Officer of Company C, 1st Light Armored Recon Battalion. He previously served as a Marine Officer Instructor of Military Science and Leadership at Penn State University. He's currently our very own Business Operations Manager here at Firestorm. Please welcome Duane Blank. Duane, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
I know you had to come really far, and by really far, I mean probably walk 45 steps from your desk to the podcast studio.
Facts. Not that far.
All right. Duane, you got a really interesting background. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
All right. So you got to start off at the beginning with me, right? So I came from the swamps of Louisiana. If you ever watch the History Channel and see them hunting alligators, that's exactly where I'm from. So I left there the day after I graduated high school to join the Marine Corps. It was always a dream of mine. So coming from Louisiana, as you know, Mardi Gras is a big thing. Mm-hmm. And then I had a really close family friend that during the Mardi Gras parade, he saw the Marines marching in front and said, "Duane, if you ever wear that uniform, you know you made it. You mess with the best and you die like the rest." Mm. So ever since I was on his shoulders, it was a dream of mine. And leaving high school, I made it happen.
That's cool. All right. And what was that like leaving Louisiana? Because I assume you kind of lived there for most of your life before that, based on your awesome accent.
Yeah, it was. Some of the stories are pretty funny, and of course, all the way through boot camp, I was called Waterboy and Bobby Boucher because I came to MCRD San Diego, and during that time, of course, the movie came out, and I had the only accent.
Oh boy!
Because my uncle was a Marine during Vietnam, and as you know, the Marines are very much in legacy. Mm. So instead of going to Paris Island, they sent me to San Diego. So first time seeing a big city. It was first time ever riding on a plane and getting there, and then the shock and awe. So most of your listeners, if they were on here and they want to argue between San Diego and Paris Island, I grew up in the swamp, so sand fleas don't bother anything. But what did make it crazy was the fireworks from SeaWorld when you're getting yelled at. That was that really off-put me from there.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? You're getting screamed at. What is it, like 8 o'clock every night or something like that? You probably remember. Maybe 9.
Exactly. It was like clockwork. So it was a huge transition for me, but it was what was needed for me. Coming from the swamps, doing sugarcane farming, not the best education in the world, but the Marine Corps gave me a drive in order to make myself better. And that's pretty much what it did.
And we'll talk about some of these, but I might have to just refer to you as professor for the rest of this. So we'll get to that in a second. Tell us a little bit what you did during your career with the Marine Corps.
All right. So with the Marine Corps, it all kind of builds off of what I just said there, right? So I went to boot camp, went to SOI, I was a machine gunner. Knuckle dragger had to start off, right? So my first duty station was Guantanamo Bay on the Cuba. In Cuba, and that really set it off. I was a Rifle Security Company Leeward before they shut it down in 99 to 2000. And I experienced some of the first things that developed my personality while I was there. Watching somebody watch you from across a minefield, dealing with Cuban asylum seekers, whenever you're 18 years old by yourself on a post, it kind of made you realize that the world is bigger than just you. And it made you realize that also the Marines that were around you was really important and depending on them. So that drove me what was next. From there, I went to 2nd Battalion, 6 Marines. I did the 22nd MEU during that time. And if you do the math, you know it's around 9/11 time frame. So supported that and then came back from there and then went on the initial invasion of Iraq as a machine gunner sergeant with a Mark 19 and on top of a rusted out Humvee. So in that, from there, I learned my leadership. I learned what it took to be a leader in very much complex situations.
And what does it take? And it's a complicated answer, I'm sure, right?
It is a very complicated answer, right? So what you realize, especially as a Marine Corps infantry guy, you're not dealing with your special ops people. You're not dealing with people that made it through selection. You're not dealing with these highly physical, smart individuals, but they are smart in their own way. Like you're dealing with this person that can fix a Humvee with a straw, with an MRE spoon in the middle of nowhere. You're sitting there in mop suits for days at a time, NBC suits, running to barriers, doing those things. And then you have the funniest guy in the world that's making you laugh. and making it worth it. So what did you learn during that time? You learned warfare is dynamic, but it's all about people. So whether it's your enemy or your team members, it's how they react and how you can make the enemy react. Because the technology that you have may be the worst in the world. If you were to look to see pictures of me back then, I was I would wear small regular camis. For those out there that knows, I was in a large, long set of desert camis with a point blank vest that was just gave to me while we were there, with only one sappy up front, no sappy in the back, and the point blank vest was green, and my Kevlar cover was green. So all my vital areas that you would shoot at was not camouflaged. But that it kind of made you realize when you went out there that it was the mission that you were doing.
Yeah. All right. So take us like what happened after Iraq.
So after Iraq, on the plane ride back, so that's one of my core memories. So President Bush and everything on there jumps on the TV screen, and he said, "Hey, thank you. I'm on a 777. We got flight attendants as soon as we leave the Middle East, handing out beers."
Nice.
And then as I have my beer, my sergeant major comes up to me and is like, "Hey, Sergeant Blank, you got orders?" And I'm like, "Orders? Like, I'm not even back home yet." And he's like, "Yeah, you're going to be a drill instructor at MCRD San Diego." I'm like, "All right, I'm not coming back." And he's like, "No, man, you report in 2 weeks." So from there, that's what happened. So from there, I became a drill instructor. I pushed 7 platoons. It was really humbling, right? So some of the things that I did, training Marines that went into combat, because now this is 2004. So all the Marines I trained did all An-Nazariyah, Fallujah, all the different major combats, and getting the phone calls, the letters back from those recruits that you trained, and then staying in contact, pinning silver stars and bronze stars onto your recruits because they look back at just a job you did was really humbling. And that's what led to my next chapter, right? So as I said, the swamp boy from Southern Louisiana just tried to push himself to do better and better. And I got selected at that time was General Salinas for what's called the Broadened Opportunity for Officer Selection and Training. So it's for people like me that didn't have the best education in the world, that a general officer thought that they would make good officers.
Yeah.
So once I stopped training recruits, I was in charge of the academic instruction platoon. So taught history, general military subjects and everything just before I got out. And the general said, "Duane, you're going to Newport, Rhode Island." I'm like, "Okay." So they sent me to Newport, Rhode Island for 9 months in order to do a crash course in college classes. And you had to make the ACT and ASVAB score in order to go to college. And surprisingly, I did.
Yes. That's my boy.
So, and then from there, I got enrolled into the MESEP program, which is the Marine Enlisted Commissioning Program. And they sent me to LSU. And I got my degree in kinesiology, one class away from a pre-med degree, but I was a gunny at that time and ready to get back to the war.
Yeah. All right. So you went from Louisiana back to LSU. Did you get to pick where you went?
I did.
Okay.
I put in for it. It wasn't my choice, to be honest with you. I had my 25-year wedding anniversary this year, and my wife pretty much told me, we just had my son at that time, we're going back next to family. But if anything else, what it did show me was the reason I joined the Marine Corps in the first place.
All right. And then tell us how you ended up at Penn State.
All right. So from LSU, I was chosen by one person that actually toured here who was the CEO of the basic school at that time. He's like, "Duane, you're staying infantry." And I'm like, my wife was not happy about that, but I stayed infantry. So from there, I did the 13th MEU as a platoon commander. I did Murph D in Darwin, Australia as a company XO. And then I got chosen to go to Penn State. So at that time, they had 8 spots open. Penn State was one of them. Over 300 people put in for it. And I got my first choice and got to go to Penn State and teach.
Yeah. And you had a pretty famous person in your classes.
I did. I had a couple famous people that I taught throughout there because also I assisted at the Smil Business College. over there.
Mhm.
And then for leadership classes, they had a bunch of people that came in just for seminars, and I got to teach some pretty famous people.
Yeah. One of them might be a football player.
Yep. So one football player that they have right now that I believe is for the Eagles.
Yep.
He would walk to class with me because I had to be in uniform all the time.
Yep.
And he would people would not want to be around me, or they would actually give me a buffer. So he enjoyed the buffer.
That's right. He's talking about Saquon Barkley, which is pretty cool. So we're finishing up our time at Penn State.
Yep.
And then what was next?
So after Penn State, it's they sent me to Maneuver Captain's Career Course down in Georgia. So I got a little bit of love with the Army during that time. And then I came back to be the commanding officer of Alpha Company, 1st LAR, and Charlie Company. So within those two, so War Pig and Arthur, I got a chance to lead a company of Marines, which was phenomenal. It was huge. The biggest thing about that I will say, also, that was the most challenging time in my career. I won't go into too much detail on why, is even though initial invasion, 13th MU deployment, MRF-D deployment, training from there was a training incident that had happened during that time that was life-changing for me. It was absolutely life-changing. And that kind of from all my career into seeing how even training, if you don't plan it correctly, if you don't ensure your I's are dotted and T's are crossed, bad things can happen. And also, you can't control everything. So the incident happened with a round that even after the investigation, they couldn't figure out why it exploded or how it did, and it hurt a few Marines. And after that investigation, looking through it, it really solidified my care for Marines in the leadership, because how those Marines came together in a training incident, whenever they thought everything was cool, they weren't hyped up, they weren't 100% ready to go, and then something happened, it really led me to where I thought tactically and cared about Marines going forward.
Talk to me a little bit about, you basically had this career, you started the lowest level and you worked your way up and you were selected because of how hard you work and your intelligence along the way. What are things the general public don't understand about the Marine Corps that you think they should?
So the biggest thing about Marines, yes, we are fanatics, because of the first thing that we learn. And if you haven't noticed this, then it's going to be enlightening to you. Marines don't know what I is. And a lot of people are like, but Duane, they wear their uniforms. They do all this stuff. Like, they're the loudest people. The first thing you learn at boot camp, the first thing you learn at officer candidate school, and I know because I've been through both and a drill instructor, was this recruit, this candidate, you no longer say I. So the biggest time that you're going to have, the worst time you can have, as soon as you say I. And it makes sense, because if you ever met a Marine and whenever they're down on themselves, they're always saying, I did this wrong. I shouldn't have done that. The same situation, you come into them and it's like, man, me and my boys, we did this. Like, we attacked that. We fell down in that hole. Man, it was raining and we made it through. So the biggest thing you need to know about the Marine Corps, even like the worst gear, and we could talk about how all the deployments and all that stuff happened, but that's when Marines are at the happiest, because from the get-go, they learned that it's not about them. So as you see a Marine on Capitol Hill, if you see a Marine in a deployment on a documentary, they're the most proud whenever they're talking about the whole.
When you hear people, now that you're out of the military, say the word I, does it create some sort of like response in your body? Is it now like in your immune system? You're like, ugh, I can't believe you said that word.
Not the word itself, but the actions.
The actions.
The actions is what drives you crazy. It's because you're so used to being part of that team.
Right.
It's everybody's working towards that common goal. It's whenever somebody says we, but acts differently, that's what really stops. And then, to be honest with you, that's the world. That's the world that we live in. It's the world that the transition is the hardest for a Marine. knowing that not everybody's out for the greater good. Not everybody's out for your mission. And that is the hardest part of the transition.
Well, talk to me about how the Marines would use that idea of we versus I from a leadership standpoint. Like,
Okay.
In charge, when you were in charge of different groups of people, how would you use that idea or concept or the words? How are those important?
All right, I'll use a direct example, COVID. So I was a company commander during the COVID time, right? And then during that time, there was a lot of I going on, right? Like, my wife would be, why do you have to go to work? Nobody's going to work. But as a commander in a deployment coming up, it didn't matter. Like if we were going to catch COVID, we're all going to do it in the back of an LAV, AV anyway. So the we is we are greater than what this whole pandemic is. If we get called to go out front, we need to be ready. Same thing that you see in the Pacific right now with the island hopping campaigns, MLR. Look throughout history, everything the Marine stands for. Go all the way back to Belleau Wood, right? So they had to get across a wheat field. It wasn't one. They did it by doing, I'm up, he sees me, I'm down. They did it together. Follow me. In the Pacific right now, the Navy showed us in Guadalcanal, if they're getting bombarded, guess what? The Marine Corps is going to have to figure out how to stay on an island surrounded by the enemy in order to do it. And then now, so as a leader, you must be cocky.
Sure.
You have to train your Marines to say, all right, they left us. We are here. This is us. We will not be defeated. And then, like I said, in history, and the Marine Corps proves that too. For example, do you know why 4th Marine Regiment is not in the United States? So 4th Marine Regiment is out in Okinawa because they were part of the Philippines, right? Whenever General MacArthur surrendered. So the Marine Corps does not allow those colors back in the United States.
Amazing. I did not know that. Okay, so I want to shift gears here for a little minute here, right? Let's talk a little bit about technology, because that's like kind of the theme of the show, right? The Marine Corps always gets like, when you hear people talk about it, they seem to kind of get the hand-me-downs, if you will, from the Navy. That's like the general thought. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, we get the hand-me-downs from everybody. So I've had hand-me-downs from the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. But on the flip side, when you have this low of a budget as the Marine Corps has, don't you want proven gear?
No.
Like if you're out there doing the worst with the worst stuff and it still works, it's going to work. So there's a duality to that.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think from like now that you've worked at a technology company for a couple of years, what technologies do you think are going to come in and make a huge difference within the Marines over the next couple, I don't know, let's say 12 to 24 months?
That's
assuming they have the budget.
Yeah, assuming they have the budget, 100%. So I'll go history and go Professor Blank on you there, right?
There we go.
So here's the dilemma in the evolution of warfare and where I think the Marine Corps is going and where they should go. So it's evolution of armor and infantry. And that is the story of the Marine Corps, right? Everybody got mad when the Marine Corps went away from tanks because tanks were used on islands hopping from there. So now I'm at a technology company and then I'm dealing with drones. I'm dealing with 3D printing from everything from orthotics to Class 9 parts to drones. And so what is that the armor or the infantry is what I come to work wondering every day. So for the Marine Corps to adopt something, it's got to be within that paradigm. So if it's the infantry, if it's maneuver, let's talk about maneuver with drones and what the Marine Corps needs. They need cheap, attritable, loitering munitions.
Okay.
That can defend an island, right? So if you look at what's out there right now, whoever are in the contested waters, they have a bunch of assets, some covert, some overt, right? And then how, as a company within this informational warfare age, how do you overcome that, right? Because you do one wrong, negligent discharge, and now it's an international event, and the Marines are wrong because they're the ones out front. But if you're able to voice it to say that they came against us. And then now the information warfare is on your side. So what do we need? We need a bunch of things that we could do overtly and covertly in order to meet the narrative that's needed in warfare, because everybody's watching.
Yeah. So is the idea then, I mean, and maybe you had a hand in this, to be able to, if there is a conflict in that part of the world, make sure that the narrative is owned by the good guys.
Yes.
Okay.
And it moves quick.
Sure.
As you know, with this podcast right here, I mean, people can come on here and then slide it however they want it to go.
Yeah, of course.
So whenever you talk about warfare, that's what we do. And that's where here, working for a technology company, it's fun to shape. Because every single asset in the ability to build something that could do both of those things is a game changer. Because it's not this exquisite capability that has NASCAR tags written across it that 100% overt you did it. Now here's a capability that you can create, not tied to a log chain, not tied to a name, that you could send out there and do both missions.
Okay, so let's now go. That was like wave tops. Let's go like high level.
Okay.
Talk to me about, what do you think how do you deter a conflict in the Pacific? And then heaven forbid something starts there. How do you win a conflict in the Pacific?
All right, presence. So presence is everything. The scary thing about being an infantry commander is everything is in your face. And then that's where, whenever you talk about Ukraine and all your guess about Ukraine, UAS has changed how everything looks. But look at companies now. They're building EMPs that's stopping everything from coming, the armor and the infantry. There you go. It comes again. So high level, how do you stop it? It's exactly what we're doing right now. It's the show of force. It's we are there. We are doing it. Because what's the only way to combat that? Is show of force against it, right? So, and then in the public eye, if they see a bunch of American Marines out there and they see a bunch of adversary right next to each other, you can't really play that in the public eyes because they're both out there and it combats it that way. Now, if the flag goes up and it's time to go, I think the only way that we win in the Pacific is, to quote old Mattis, hearts and minds. We get out there, and that's where the information campaign, everything is starting even now.
Yeah.
As you look where everybody sides, the Marines go out there, they hand out soccer balls. They're out there within there just like they're at on islands right now, and they show. They don't just put on a big flashy advertisement. They're out there so that whenever the enemy shows like, oh, here's the destruction, it's like there's a Marine over there handing candy out to, it was like, oh, that's not what we want to show. You can't hide boots on the ground, and nobody wants boots on the ground. Everybody is scared of doing that because it's called casualties. And that's how history, Vietnam, the war on terror, we stayed there so long that the casualties and the public opinion turned. So to backtrack on there, whenever you look at the big thing, information warfare, communication, covert, overt operations in order to support those. And that's how you get to a war now in today's society and how you win. Who can outcycle the other during that?
Interesting. That is a really interesting phrase you just used. Who can outcycle the other person? Because the information warfare is just so massive. I mean, there's a lot of people that argue that Israel had the public will of the whole world after the massacres in October, and they lost the cycle because of all the images of dead people in Gaza, right?
Yes.
So the cycle is really important. So you're to take that idea now for the Pacific, you're saying we got to have a coalition, we got to be present, but we have to basically almost be on our best behavior. Is that the best way to do it, or at least tell the narrative that we are the good guys and we're stopping the bad guys? Is that fair?
It is fair. And then whenever you look at what we are talking about now, swarming, in the ability to do ISR. So if the enemy comes up and gives a narrative to say that the United States or Marines were at this place doing this operation, and this is the result. Well, if there was an ISR platform that was following and that was video in it,
Sure.
and then you could turn the narrative immediately. It's like, no, this is not. Here's actual feed from 5 different Suez platforms that did this, and here's how it really happened.
Okay, so do you think that the Marine Corps has the assets right now that it needs to carry out this kind of grand vision you're talking about to support boots on the ground, but then also kind of persistent ISR, or are there some gaps that need to be filled?
So that's a rough answer, right? Because the Marine Corps is going to find a way.
Okay.
The Marine Corps is going to find a way, whether it has it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But is it lacking exquisite systems that could be beneficial to its Marines? Yes. Whether that's through funding, whether that's through acquisition programs, that's I'm not really the subject matter expert on that to say, but I can tell you that innovation is moving a lot quicker than it was in 99 when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
The human factor and then the intelligence of the service members they have now
Mm-hmm.
are a lot better than me coming from the swamps in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about what the Marine Corps needs in order to be effective in the next war, the cycle of armor and infantry. If we have exquisite things that can knock every single small UAS out the sky, break every single Starlink, and Marines are going back to affixing bayonets and a map and a compass, yeah, we'll find ways to win. If the enemy has a technological advantage that we can't do that, and they could swarm against us, and the Marines aren't given that equal footing to what our enemy has, it's going to be a bloodbath.
How concerned do you get when you look at near peer with just like the technological innovation we're now seeing out of this axis of Russia, China, North Korea, Iran? I mean, it looks like they're a lot better than they were at the start of the war in Ukraine, you know?
Well, information warfare.
Sure.
We thought Russia was a lot bigger than what they were before they went into Ukraine.
Absolutely.
Now, the public opinion, what's getting me whenever you look at China, so Iran's where it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
China's starting to put a public campaign of big hearts and rainbows, let's say right now, like, oh, we're putting this tent over this building right now to save our citizens from toxic things, going back into that cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're winning the hearts and minds of the people inside China, to where our narrative before was that, no, the people inside China are not happy.
Mm-hmm.
So China is the big worry.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't have SIPR access. I don't have anything to know what's in there. But I could tell you from face value, I think that's our biggest threat right there.
And what do we need to do better, do you think, as a country to counter that threat?
I know this is going to sound crazy, and this is coming from a Marine, right?
Yeah.
Is education. So the funny thing, and whenever I say education, everything from a young age about what information warfare is. Because how do we win? How do we do during the initial invasion of Iraq? That initial invasion of Iraq was shock and awe. I was sitting there when General Mattis gave his speech before we went in and then crossed the line of departure. And we got our orders. Communications were shut down. We outran our logistics line, but we conquered. Why? Because we had commanders' intent. If this country educated its people on the intent of warfare, the fundamentals of warfare, even at a young age, so that they could debate what is right and what is wrong, what's good information, what's trying to push me to where it is, that is how we win. Because when you talk about a free country to a communist country, freedom of thought is always going to win as long as you don't turn it against each other. So you turn the narrative on China, and then its people are like, they have the ability to think. Why? Because where are most of the Chinese educated? When I was at Penn State, I had a whole bunch, and our debates went on to that. They were like, wow, that was, yeah, I don't see why the U.S. is put in such a bad lens. Like, I have just talked to a person on the right, the left, the middle, and they're all good people and they just
Right.
want to be free.
Yeah. So basically, like, there's clearly information warfare. I mean, you look at how many bots exist on social media. It's like unbelievable. And again, there's not to pick a side, but to just divide people, right?
Yes.
How do you, and this is like a great, and this is not where I intend the podcast to go, but this is a really interesting idea. How do you teach people to be able to be discerning citizens when it comes to information, or discern, how can you discern good information?
So it's funny you ask that. So whenever I taught evolution of warfare, I started off every single one of my classes with that question, right? Because what is warfare? It's two irreconcilable wills that trying to oppose itself on the other. So how do you do this information warfare, right? It's still warfare. So you find a common ground, always. No matter what, there is always a common ground, and you work from the common ground. So how in the military do you attack information warfare? What is the ground truth? And then you work your narrative from the ground truth in order to fit your narrative. So how do you educate people to do that other than automatically blowing up? You have people, and what I taught my students to do is like, I agree with you on this. Now, I disagree here. But you always start off with, whenever you look at the newscast, all right, I could see how that could be true, but this is kind of far off. What are you trying to, I'm in combat, even if you agree with it, I'm in combat with your view. How do I combat this view? And then if you can't, then it's truth. If you can, you're only educating yourself more. Does that make sense?
Absolutely does. It's a really interesting approach too. Like, I don't hear people talk enough about that. Like, again, I think 90% of people, at least in this country, want the same stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Safety, good education, decent healthcare, place to live, affordability. And yet, for whatever reason, there's like tension, obviously.
Yeah.
But again, finding the common ground seems to be something that should be very easy to check down to, and then you use it to build consensus. When you're evaluating if something is real or not, how do you do it personally?
How do I do it personally? If you look up, probably I'm on a watch list somewhere because I look from CNN, MSNBC, Al Jazeera. Then I go to like, hey, what's the trending news in South America? What's the trending news? And then I try to find the dissenting opinions and see what they're saying and find the middle.
I love that. One of the people I went to school with, she worked at Al Jazeera for a number of years. And the stories she would tell me, and then she worked at, American and British news agencies. Al Jazeera for a long time was viewed as a like nonpartisan source of truth. And I don't know where it is today, but it's super interesting you bring that up. Like, we got to think a little bit outside of the bounds, you know what I mean? Of like a CNN versus a Fox, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I like that idea. That's super interesting. And again, if it's a localized issue, then go to the local source.
Yeah.
Right? They'll probably have better insight than someone writing from, Los Angeles or Washington or Atlanta, right?
And that's a good point too, because what I taught with people there, it's like, Duane, the problem's too big. Whenever you talk about warfare, no, it's not. If you talk about in America, it's not too big. My big thing is like your operational battle space is too big in what you're trying to figure out. For example, whenever you talk about elections, right? Why doesn't everybody go to City Hall? You can influence City Hall. You know the people. You see them in the grocery store. You do that. You know you can make a difference right there. And then you audit up. What do I mean by that? So your county. You could still go to your county.
Yeah.
Did they meet whatever your intent was?
Was the judge good? Was the sheriff good?
Was that?
Was the county commissioner good?
Yes, but everybody seems trying to go to the national level, the world level. Oh, I disagree with this, but you didn't even start at the bottom, what you can influence. So influence what you can,
Do you think that makes you a happier person if you do that?
Yes.
Because it's actually something that's in your control?
Yeah, 100%.
Because like people screaming about Trump or people screaming about Biden or whoever, it's so out of their control.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Control what you can and then make that your effort, And because if it's a local election and you lost a local election, you can look left and right and have the conversation on why. And that's what's important, is the conversation on why. If you look at a national level, you can't have a conversation with someone in New York City while I'm sitting in San Diego unless it's over some social media platform that's already biased.
Isn't it interesting how like very small issues sometimes like will determine elections? For instance, the city of San Diego's broke, and they just put a parking fee on the big park we have in our city, Balboa Park. And the amount of anger that is happening in this city because people now have to pay a couple dollars an hour to go to the park because it's been free forever, it's probably going to cost the mayor his job. You know what I mean?
Yes.
When you think about information warfare, how important is it to find those seams and to find the things that like become like reverberating issues?
So once again, let's go back to the ISR issue, right? Now, if he's able to prove that that money benefits the city as a whole, that's just time and waiting in the information warfare. You just take the hits. You take the hits, that becomes the norm. That becomes everybody's like, oh, I'm going there. Then you turn the narrative. Like, oh yeah, you saw this new beautiful thing that we have. Guess what? Your taxes just went down this much because we have this. That's how you save that within an information warfare. But it's real. And then now today, tactical patience is unheard of. Nobody knows what tactical patience is anymore because everybody's so looking at that next thing. What's next? What's in my next scroll? What's the next thing coming out? Tactical patience is still a real thing, to where sometimes you have to sit down, let things play out, because if the ground truth, I agree with you on this. I agree that the city being broke is not a good thing.
Right.
How do we fix it? Then you can destroy the other narrative.
Interesting. Damn, philosophy, Duane. No, it's great. I want to change gears here for just two last questions. Okay. One, what advice would you give to your younger self? Because you've had quite a journey.
I would say to myself, don't give up. Don't, like, just because where you came from doesn't define who you are. Because for so long, having the worst education, coming down from being from the swamps, it defined who I was, and it held me back. As soon as I had a mentor, Fumi Adiemi looked at me and he told me, Duane, you're not in the swamps. Like, you're a sergeant in the Marines, and your Marines love you. Here's spelling for Marines. Here's math for Marines. Here's grammar for Marines. Go sit down and then learn how to talk, learn how to speak, get better educated. That's what I would tell myself earlier.
You share that lesson with your kids too?
I do. My son's in the Coast Guard. He had all the opportunity to go to college. Mm-hmm. His biggest thing that he learned from that was that he told me, he's like, nah, Duane, Dad, I'm going enlisted. I'm like, son, go to college. I worked so that you didn't have to. He's like, nah, you got where you were because you worked to get there. And that's what I want to do. And that was a proud dad moment.
That is a very proud dad moment.
Yeah.
Right? Something was getting through and on all those car ride conversations, I'm sure, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then last one, right? If you, having been in positions of leadership, right? Mm-hmm. What's the one thing you would tell other leaders or people who want to be leaders? What's the number one lesson?
It's not about you. Like 100%. Just I'll circle back to what the Marine Corps said. And as soon as you look at the whole above yourself, your unit starts working that way. As soon as the people see that you care, like truly care, it's not just words, it's not you trying to get a higher position, a higher authority. As soon as they see you truly care about the people themselves, they'll charge machine gun nests for you. They'll run up mountains. They'll do anything because they know you're not putting them in danger for no good reason. So that's what I tell leaders.
That's great. Duane, thanks for coming today. This is an awesome conversation. I think we covered a bunch of different topics I did not expect, which is awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I do talk too much.
No, you don't. That was great. Thanks for listening to the Drone Wars podcast. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe, to catch all the latest insights for all things defense and geopolitics.